Well, good morning, YouTube subscribers. Got an interesting project here I thought I'd do a video on today. A buddy of mine brought over, here about 6 months ago, brought over a Stihl 046 Magnum, and he had taken it to the shop to see what was wrong with it, and they put it in a box for him and said, it's terminal. And so I put it up in my shed, never even thought about it for 6 months or so, and here, a week or so ago, I thought, well, I'll just take a look at that and see what it's all about. So I started taking it apart, and I'll show you what we found. When I first took the clutch off, I grabbed the crankshaft and I could wiggle it. And I thought, that's a bearing, and that's not good. So we started tearing it down a little bit, and now mind you, I've never torn down a Stihl from top to bottom. So this is kind of new territory for me. And but we definitely found the problem. There were found two problems that I found so far, and I'll show you what those are. The first problem, as I suspected, was the bearing on the clutch side. And when I got everything apart, that's what was left of the bearing on the clutch side. It was a mess, to say the least. So the other problem that I found as I was cleaning some parts was the intake manifold boot. Now if you look real close, you'll see right there, there's a split in that manifold boot. We have some new bearings for both the cranks, for the crankshaft bearings. And now for those of you purists out there, these are not Stihl bearings. They're knockoffs, but I think they're going to be just fine, as is the gasket set. Now, if I wanted to spend another couple $100 on parts, I probably could have got Stihl OEM stuff, but for this, I decided to just go the aftermarket route. Now, what I've got is I took this apart. These are all the pieces I took apart, and I kind of labeled everything, put them in baggies here to kind of, because I didn't know this is clutch side, housing bolts, etc. I kind of labeled all of these little baggies that I took off of different portions. There's the oil pump right there. There's the clutch stuff and the bar plates. Carburetor in that bag over there, and related electrical stuff's in there. So anyway, I took this apart and kind of left things out, got all the parts cleaned up. As you can guess, when the crankshaft seal went on the clutch side, so there's a lot of oil things coming out there, and these parts were a mess. So I got it pretty well cleaned up. You can still see it's not perfect, but it's about as clean as I can get it. And took everything apart, and the cylinder head is awesome. This thing, I don't know if it's ever been run much. My friend basically uses it for cutting firewood and what have you, and I'm not sure he's actually used it that much. So anyway, I kind of laid it all out so I can keep track of everything. First thing we're going to do is press those bearings in there into the housing on both the clutch side and the flywheel side, and then begin to put the crankshaft back in and start building her back together. All right. Now what I like to do here is I like to have a pretty clean place, and I put down a piece of this craft paper so I know it's clean, and I can keep track of something. If I drop a little snap ring or something like that, I can usually find it on here, a lot easier than blending into the steel on the bench. So this usually works out pretty good for me, and I'll maybe clean up a few parts here, and this kind of soaks it up a little bit on some of the parts cleaner stuff. So it typically works out pretty well. Here are some of the other parts that I just threw in this bin here after I clean them up. These are basically the housing stuff, and this is all stuff that's going to go on at the end. So I just threw them in this bin after they got them cleaned up to keep them all together so I don't lose anything. Okay, first bearing we're going to press in is on the clutch side, and this bearing has a little ridge on it right here that goes to the outside, and then the seal goes down over the top of that. So we're going to press it in right there, and to press it, since I don't have a press, I'm going to use the next best thing I can come up with, and that is a 1/2-inch drive socket that just fits right on the edge of that bearing race. And then on the other side, I'll put a socket that'll go over here like that. And this is little bigger here, so I had to dip into my 3/4 inch drive stuff, and I've got a socket that'll fit right over that housing there and provide a good backdrop for it to press through there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bolt here, we're going to put that through there, and then we'll go through here like that, put the bearing on, get it on the right way here, and we'll do that, and then put that on there, get all this kind of closed up a little bit before we get too excited about it. When I'm assembling these parts, I take a little bottle like this. It's got some Stihl 2-cycle oil in it, which I use, and just put a little teeny bit around there to rub on a little bit. Slick it up a little, just a shade. Okay, you can feel it when it hits the bottom there. I can't, it got tight, so I don't want to go any further. Here you can see we got it in there real good, and the seal will go down right on, just flush here, and it bottomed in there just right. We're going to need to do it a little bit differently on the flywheel side, because the socket I needs to fit right on that little bit of casting right there, and so I'm going to need a smaller socket and put that one away. We're going to use a 7/8 socket and put it right there on this housing area right there that we can press against. Okay, so it's going to go in like that. And it's going to go down, and it'll hold it in there just right. And we'll get it on the bearing. You can feel that start to go down. And it's going in there nice and straight. Okay, now where we are here is we've got to press these two halves together with the crankshaft. And I got some locating pins on each half here. We've got a new gasket. Okay, got the crankshaft back in on the flywheel side. And what I was able to do is I took a 7/8 deep socket that fit right there and just laid it down on the bench and started tapping it gently with my nylon head hammer here so we don't damage the threads, and it was able to go right on in there. So now we've got that together. Now we need to press the other side in with the gasket. Okay, I'm not 100% sure I should use this, but I'm going to use some of this Durco high temp sealant that I've actually used on McCullough saws before to seal crankcase parts, but I'm going to put a little teeny bead along here to also hold the gasket in place. And I actually got this from the Stihl saw shop that they use, so I'm going to assume that they would use it also in doing this. If some of you experts out there have a different view, don't forget to send me a comment. I'm learning here, first time I've ever done a Stihl, so if I do it wrong, that's how I'm going to learn. Okay, you can kind of see where I've got a little teeny bead, almost like a film. Looks like it's wider in some places than the other, but it's basically just pretty flat on there. So we're going to put the gasket on there and then do the same thing to the other, over here to the clutch side of the crankcase. Okay, we've got the gasket on the flywheel side of the crankcase, and I got another little film around here on this side, and now we're going to go ahead and put them together. Okay, we've got both pieces of the crankcase in here together, where I think we can begin to get the bolts installing the bolts. Okay, YouTube, here we are. We've got this kind of starting to put it back together. I had put the crankcase back together, and I was just getting ready to, I was putting the seals in, and I noticed my battery ran out of gas after I had already put the seals in. So we popped them down with a socket on this side and bumped them in there with a little rubber-headed hammer. They were real tight when I put them in, and I made a mistake, and I didn't put any grease around them like I normally do, and I just totally spaced it out. So what I did is I took Stihl 2-cycle oil and put a few drops on the crankshaft on this side around the seal, let it set overnight, then did the same thing on the clutch side. And it seemed to, it loosened up pretty good because the seals were pretty tight. So I think we're ready to go. I got all the back on, the carburetor's on. I did have to get a couple of new parts that I noticed when I really started inspecting them. The little worm for the chain oiler was messed up. I think the crankshaft, when this bearing crapped out, it was going around just enough, and it ripped the threads off of here, the gears off of this little plastic thing. Also, what happened, and it took me a while to figure this out, I looked at them very closely, but the coil was messed up. I tested it with an ohm meter and couldn't get the right reading. And then I started looking at it pretty close, and I could tell where it was, I think the flywheel had hit it. I'll show it to you. Okay, this is the old coil, and if you can see right here, you can actually feel right there where it looks like the flywheel got out of line on it or something. I can't believe it even ran like that, but it apparently did. And I think messed up the laminations in it such that it just wouldn't do anything. So I got, this was a 3 bolt, and I got a 2-bolt. This is an aftermarket. And also I noticed the flywheel. So once I saw that the coil was a little jacked up, I started looking at the flywheel, and I took a screwdriver, and I was going around to the magnets, and this is the newer one. I'll show you the older one. So for some reason, the magnet, this one magnet right here, and I don't know if it was because it was hitting that coil or what, but it's really weak. And barely, now this one over here seems to be about normal, but the coil or the magnet right there, and you can tell where it got worn a little bit somehow. You can probably see that right there, but it barely has any magnetic pull to it. So I went and got a new aftermarket coil, and I found a used Stihl flywheel, so we should be good to go. So we're going to start putting things back together. Okay, we've got the oiler bolted down, clutch back on, sprocket and drum, and this plastic shield goes over the chain brake. We've got that back on. We'll put the over here, put the flywheel on, adjusted the coil, so we got that set properly, and now we're going to start putting the cowling on it. This aftermarket coil had a little bit longer spark plug cord than the original equipment, so I'm going to have to just make sure it gets down in there and stays there a little bit, I guess. Okay, I just put the starter on here a little bit without putting all the bolts in it. I just wanted to make sure we've got some good spark. So, oh yeah, good spark. So I think we're going to go ahead and put everything back together, get some fuel to it, and see what we've got. Before I put the cover on, I'll point out one little thing that I had to Jippo together here. And the insert for this AV mount right here was gone. So what I did is I went to the hardware store, and I got a little thing like that, a nylon deal like that at Lowe's, and I split it so it'd fit in there. and then I also have an insert that's solid that goes through that the screw goes through, and then put a nylon washer on top of it. So I think it'll work quite well. We're going to give it a whirl here and see what happens. Okay, by golly, I think we've got this put together. Cranked it up and it seemed to pop pretty good. Sounds all right. I didn't do anything with the carburetor on this, just so let's start it up and see what it sounds like. I think we're going to call that one a wrap. First time I've ever worked on one of these, as I think I mentioned earlier in the video, so I've got a little experience now on a Stihl. These things are actually pretty darn easy to take apart and put back together. So I might do that and do another one of these someday. So anyway, we're going to get this back to my buddy, and I tried to talk him into getting a bigger bar for it. He runs a 24-inch bar on it. I said, you know, this thing will at least pull a 32 very nicely, then you don't have to bend over so much. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe and comment. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.